Long ago, surrounded by high mountains, dense cedar forests, and green fields, there was a peaceful town called Nurabad. A very wealthy merchant named Abdul Rahman Beg lived there. He owned many trading caravans that traveled to distant kingdoms and brought back silk, precious spices, rare jewels, and expensive fabrics. His large warehouses were filled with grain, and his magnificent mansion was famous throughout the region. People considered Abdul Rahman Beg a fortunate man. But despite his enormous wealth, he never found true peace. The more wealth he gained, the more his desires grew. Abdul Rahman Beg had 3 sons. His eldest son, Cameron, was much like his father. He was always focused on wealth, profit, and business. His middle son, Faraz, was very proud of his looks, expensive clothes, and luxurious lifestyle. He loved being praised and always wanted to stand out among others. But his youngest son, Arson, was completely different. He was neither interested in gold and silver nor proud of his appearance. He enjoyed reading books, listening to the wisdom of elders, and helping people in need. Because of his kindness and humility, the people of Nurabad loved him deeply. But the love and respect Arson received made his 2 older brothers jealous of him. Time passed, until one day, Abdul Rahman Beg suddenly became seriously ill. Famous healers were called from distant places. Some tried expensive herbs, while others gave him rare medicines. But instead of recovering, his condition continued to get worse. Finally, Abdul Rahman Beg realized that his life was coming to an end. He immediately called his 3 sons to his bedside. Cameron, Faraz, and Arson stood quietly around him. In a weak but clear voice, Abdul Rahman Beg said, "My sons, I do not have much time left. But before I die, I want to give the 3 of you one final test. All my property, my business, and my wealth will belong to the son who proves that he deserves it the most." As soon as Cameron and Faraz heard this, their eyes lit up with excitement. "Father, what do we have to do?" they asked eagerly. Abdul Rahman Beg took a deep breath and replied, "The 3 of you must leave on separate journeys. Travel through the world for 1 full year, and when you return, bring me the one thing you believe is the most precious treasure in the world. Whoever returns with the most valuable treasure will inherit everything I own." Only a few moments after saying these words, Abdul Rahman Beg's voice fell silent. He closed his eyes, and never opened them again. The entire town of Nurabad was filled with grief. After his burial and the mourning traditions were completed, the 3 brothers gathered one evening in the grand hall of their father's mansion. They promised that exactly 1 year later, they would meet again in the same place and present what they had found during their journeys. The next morning, as the sun rose, the 3 brothers left Nurabad and traveled in different directions. Cameron believed that the most precious thing in the world had to be rare diamonds and jewels. So, he headed toward cities famous for their jewel markets. Faraz believed that if he could marry into the family of a powerful king, no treasure could be more valuable than such a royal connection. So, he traveled toward wealthy kingdoms and royal courts. But Arson had no clear destination and no special plan. He simply followed the road before him, placing his trust in Rab, because he believed that when a person's intentions are sincere, the right path eventually reveals itself. For the next several days, the 3 brothers continued traveling on their separate paths. Cameron went from city to city, visiting markets famous for precious jewels. Everywhere he went, he asked merchants to show him their rarest and most valuable stones. He was certain that if he found the most precious diamond in the world, his father's entire inheritance would become his. Faraz, on the other hand, traveled among royal palaces, wealthy families, and powerful nobles. He believed that if he could marry a princess or become connected to an influential royal family, no treasure in the world could be more valuable than that. But Arson's journey was completely different. He had chosen no particular city, nor was he searching for any treasure. He simply continued along a lonely road. For a long distance, there was no village, no traveler, and no sign of human life. After several days of travel, the afternoon sun became extremely hot. Arson was tired, and his water was almost gone. As he continued walking, he noticed an ancient banyan tree beside the road. Beneath its wide shade sat an old man with a long white beard. A broken clay cup lay beside him. His eyes were closed, and he seemed to be quietly whispering something. Arson walked toward him, greeted him respectfully, and sat nearby. The old man opened his eyes, looked at Arson carefully, and asked, "My son, you seem troubled. What are you searching for?" Arson told him about his father's death and the final test he had given his 3 sons. He explained that his brothers were searching for jewels and royal connections, but he still did not know what the most precious treasure in the world truly was. The old man listened quietly. Then he pointed toward a nearby spring and said, "First, drink some water, then we will talk." Arson drank from the spring and returned. The old man said, "If you truly want to discover the most precious treasure in the world, I can show you a path. But it will not be easy. I will give you 3 questions. You must find their answers through your own experiences." Arson respectfully replied, "I am ready, Baba." The old man asked his first question, "What is the kind of wealth that grows greater? The more you give it away." Arson became thoughtful. Before he could answer, the old man pointed toward a narrow dirt road and said, "Follow this path until you reach a village where the doors of every house remain open. Your first answer is waiting for you there." Arson thanked him and immediately began his journey. For several days, he traveled along the difficult road. Finally, he reached a small village. As he approached, something unusual caught his attention. He looked at one house, then another. Not a single door was locked. Every house stood open. Children played freely in the streets, while villagers moved peacefully from one home to another. No one seemed afraid of thieves, and no one appeared worried about losing their belongings. Arson slowly entered the village, looking around in surprise. He had traveled through many places, but he had never seen a village like this before. Arson slowly walked deeper into the village. He noticed that the people were not wealthy. Their homes were simple, their clothes were modest, and they owned very little. Yet there was peace on every face. There was neither greed in their eyes nor fear in their hearts. A little farther ahead, Arson saw an elderly man sitting outside his small house, telling a story to his grandson. Arson greeted him respectfully and asked, "Baba, I have never seen a village where people leave their doors open. Aren't you afraid of thieves?" The elder smiled and invited Arson to sit beside him. "My son, many years ago, our village was also filled with poverty, hunger, and fear. Everyone tried to hide whatever little they had. But then a kind woman taught us that when we hold tightly to everything, blessings disappear, and when we share with others, blessings grow." At first, the villagers did not believe her, but slowly, they began helping one another, and their lives started to change. The elder continued, "Today, even if someone has little food, he will not let his neighbor sleep hungry. If a traveler needs shelter, someone will welcome him into their home. And if a person becomes sick, the whole village comes together to care for him." He pointed toward the open houses and said, "That is why our doors remain open, because here, we consider one another family." Arson listened silently. He realized that these people might not be rich in money, but their hearts were incredibly rich. That evening, a farmer welcomed Arson into his home. The family shared their simple meal with him and gave him a place to sleep without asking for anything in return. That night, Arson remembered the old sage's first question. What is the kind of wealth that grows greater? The more you give it away. Now, he understood the answer. The next morning, Arson thanked the villagers and returned to the ancient banyan tree. The old sage was waiting beneath it. Arson told him everything he had seen and said, "Baba, I have found the answer. The wealth that grows when it is shared is generosity and kindness. The more goodness we give to others, the more it grows." The sage smiled with satisfaction. "You have understood your first lesson, my son. Always remember, a hand that gives sincerely never truly becomes empty." Then his expression became serious. "Now listen to your second question." The sage asked, "What is the one thing that makes even the wealthiest person poor without it, and even the poorest person rich when he has it?" Arson thought carefully. The old sage pointed toward the distant mountains and said, "Travel beyond those mountains. Your second answer is waiting for you there." Arson thanked him and began his journey once again. This journey was much harder. The paths were steep and rocky. His sandals became worn, and his feet were wounded. Some nights, he slept in small caves or beneath large rocks. The days were hot, and the nights were cold. But Arson did not turn back. After many difficult days, he finally reached a small settlement at the foot of the mountains. The people there seemed extremely poor. Their clothes were worn, their houses were made of mud, and their food was simple. But Arson immediately noticed something unexpected. Despite having so little, Everyone looked peaceful and content. Arson stood there in surprise. These people seemed to have almost nothing, yet they lived as though they lacked nothing. Arson slowly entered the small mountain settlement. He had expected people living in such poverty to complain about their difficult lives, but what he saw was completely different. A little farther ahead, an old woman was sitting outside her hut, quietly working at a spinning wheel. Arson greeted her respectfully and sat beside her. "Mother, I don't understand something," he said. "You people have little wealth, simple clothes, and very few comforts. Yet everyone here seems happy and peaceful. Why?" The old woman stopped her spinning wheel and smiled. "My son, we may not have much money, but we have something more valuable. We have each other." She explained that whenever her husband became ill, their neighbors helped arrange his medicine. When there was a wedding, the entire settlement celebrated together. Everyone contributed whatever they could. And whenever someone faced hardship, others stood beside them. No happiness belongs to one family alone, and no sorrow is carried by one person alone, she said. Then she looked at Arson and continued, "A person who has sincere relationships, people he can trust, and hearts that truly care for him, can never really be poor. But someone may live in a mansion filled with gold and still be poor if there is no one who truly loves him." Arson immediately remembered the old sage's second question. What makes even the wealthiest person poor without it, and even the poorest person rich when he has it? Now, he understood. True relationships, trust, and sincere love were a kind of wealth that money could never replace. While Arson was learning this lesson, Faraz was still searching for what he believed to be the greatest treasure. After traveling through several kingdoms, Faraz reached a magnificent royal city. There, he learned about Zainab, the daughter of a powerful minister. She was known for both her beauty and intelligence. Faraz believed that marrying her would give him the powerful connection he needed to win his father's inheritance. So, he spent much of his money on expensive clothes, rare perfumes, and costly gifts to impress her. But Zainab was not impressed by his wealth or appearance. One day, she asked him, "Faraz, why do you love me?" Faraz replied, "Because of your beauty, your status, and because someone like you deserves a man like me." Zainab looked at him seriously. "You have spoken about my beauty and status, but nothing about my heart or character." Then she asked, "If one day my beauty fades and my status disappears, would you still love me?" Faraz became silent. He had no answer. His silence made Zainab realize that he was attracted to her beauty and status, not to who she truly was. She refused his proposal. Faraz's dream was shattered. He had spent almost everything on clothes, perfumes, and gifts, yet gained nothing. Ashamed and disappointed, he left the royal city. Meanwhile, Arson prepared to return to the ancient banyan tree. He had found the answer to the second question. And this time, the treasure he had discovered was not something he could carry in his hands. Arson left the mountain settlement and began his journey back to the ancient banyan tree. After several days of travel, he finally reached the familiar place. The old sage was sitting beneath the tree, waiting for him. Arson greeted him respectfully and told him everything he had learned. "Baba, I have found the answer to your second question," he said. "True relationships, trust, and sincere love are real wealth. A person may have very little, but if there are people who truly love and support him, he is rich. And someone may have endless wealth, yet still be poor if he has no one who truly cares for him." The old sage smiled and nodded. "You have understood your second lesson, my son." Then his expression became serious. "Now, there is only one question left, and it is the most difficult of all." The sage asked, "What is the one thing that remains alive even after a person dies? Something no thief can steal, no fire can burn, and no amount of time can erase." Arson became silent. After a moment, he asked, "Baba, where should I go to find the answer?" The sage placed a hand over his heart and replied, "This time, you do not need to travel anywhere. Look within yourself. The final answer is hidden there." Arson sat quietly beneath the banyan tree, thinking deeply about the question. Meanwhile, Cameron was still searching for the treasure he believed would win their father's inheritance. After visiting many famous jewel markets, he met a clever merchant who showed him a beautiful red stone. The merchant claimed that it was one of the rarest jewels in the world and had once belonged to a powerful king. Cameron was immediately impressed. Blinded by greed, he gave the merchant almost everything he had: his money, valuable goods, and nearly all of his remaining wealth. In return, he received the shining red stone. Cameron was convinced that he had won the challenge. But while traveling through another city, he decided to show the stone to an experienced jeweler and learn its true value. The jeweler examined it carefully. Then he looked at Cameron and said, "I am sorry, but this is not a precious jewel. It is only colored glass." Cameron stared at him in disbelief. He had spent almost everything he owned on a worthless piece of glass. Filled with anger, Cameron rushed back to find the merchant who had sold it to him. But when he reached the marketplace, the merchant was gone. His shop was closed, and no one knew where he had disappeared. Cameron stood there with the worthless stone in his hand. For the first time, he understood what his greed had cost him. There was nothing he could do now. With almost all his wealth gone, he began the long journey back toward Nurabad, ashamed and empty-handed. Far away, beneath the ancient banyan tree, Arson knew nothing about what had happened to his brother. He remained lost in thought. The old sage's final question continued to echo in his mind. What remains alive after a person dies? What can never be stolen, never be burned, and never be erased by time? This time, there was no distant village to visit and no mountain to cross. Arson would have to find the final answer within his own heart. As evening fell beneath the ancient banyan tree, Arson continued thinking about the sage's final question. What could remain alive after a person died? Something no one could steal, fire could not burn, and time could not erase. First, he thought about wealth. But wealth could be lost or stolen. Then he thought about beauty, fame, and power. But all of them faded with time. Arson remembered the first village, where people shared what little they had and cared for one another. Then he remembered the mountain settlement, where poor families lived peacefully because they had love, trust, and sincere relationships. Finally, he thought about his father. Abdul Rahman Beg was gone, but the lesson he had given his sons was still guiding Arson. Suddenly, Arson understood. He looked at the old sage and said, "Baba, I have found the answer. What remains after a person dies is the goodness he leaves behind. His good deeds, his kindness, and the help he gives to others. A person may leave this world, but his good deeds can continue living in people's hearts." The old sage smiled and gently placed his hand on Arson's head. "You have understood all 3 lessons, my son. Your journey is complete. Now return home." Arson thanked him and began his journey back to Nurabad. The 1-year deadline was approaching, and Cameron and Faraz were also returning home. Cameron returned after losing his wealth to the dishonest merchant, while Faraz returned after learning that beauty, power, and status could never replace true love. At last, the promised day arrived. The grand hall of Abdul Rahman Beg's mansion was filled with respected elders, merchants, scholars, and family members. Everyone had gathered to discover which son had found the most precious treasure. Cameron was called forward first. With his head lowered, he admitted that the stone he had believed to be a priceless jewel was actually worthless colored glass. His greed had blinded him, and he had lost almost all his wealth because of it. Then Faraz stepped forward. He admitted that he had believed beauty, power, and royal status were the greatest treasures. But when Zainab asked whether he would still love her without her beauty and status, he had no answer. He realized that what he had wanted was not true love. Finally, Arson was called forward. He carried no jewel, treasure chest, or royal document. One of the elders asked, "Arson, what have you brought?" Arson calmly replied, "Nothing that I can place before you, but I have learned what true wealth really is." He told them about the 3 questions the old sage had given him. First, I learned that generosity is a wealth that grows when it is shared. Second, I learned that sincere relationships, trust, and love can make even a poor person rich. And finally, I learned that good deeds are the treasure that remains even after a person dies. The entire hall became silent. One of Nurabad's respected elders finally stood and said, "Now we understand Abdul Rahman Beg's true purpose. He did not send his sons away simply to find material treasure. He wanted them to discover the true meaning of wealth." The elder looked at the 3 brothers. Cameron searched for wealth and was defeated by greed. Faraz searched for beauty and status but discovered that they could not create true love. Arson returned with generosity, sincere relationships, and good deeds. Then he announced, "Arson has found the most precious treasure. He is the rightful heir to Abdul Rahman Beg's fortune. Everyone agreed. But Arson then did something unexpected. He turned toward his brothers and said, "If I keep everything for myself, then I have learned nothing from my journey. My first lesson was that true wealth grows when it is shared." So, Arson divided their father's inheritance equally among all three brothers. Cameron and Faraz were deeply moved. For the first time, they truly understood why the people of Nurabad had always respected their younger brother. From that day forward, Cameron began leaving his greed behind, while Faraz stopped measuring people by beauty and status. Arson used his wealth to help the poor, feed hungry families, support people in hardship, and offer shelter to travelers. Slowly, his brothers began following his example. Years passed, and people continued telling the story of Abdul Rahman Beg's three sons. But they did not remember them because of gold, jewels, or a magnificent mansion. They remembered the lesson their journey had taught them. True wealth is found in generosity, sincere relationships, and the good deeds we leave behind. Because wealth can disappear, beauty can fade, and power can be lost. But the goodness we leave in the hearts of others can live long after we are gone. And that is a treasure no thief can steal, no fire can burn, and no amount of time can erase.